4 people died in a plane crash.
The Air India plane crash.
Air India crash.
The deadly crash of the Air India flight. Boeing 7878 crashed in Ahmedabad shortly after takeoff.
Another day, another Boeing disaster, and this time the world is demanding answers. After the latest incident, a groundbreaking investigation has uncovered alarming issues with the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, exposing dark details that have been hidden like a peddle at the bottom of the sea. From manufacturing flaws to design defects, a lot have been whispered lately about the recent crash in India. But what really happened that day? And what role did Boeing's prized 787 Dreamliner play? Get ready for the jaw-dropping truth as the Boeing 787 nightmare is exposed, and what they just found is unbelievable. It's getting harder to trust Boeing. Every now and then, as you stroll down the street or sink into your couch to catch the latest business headlines, something rumbles overhead. No, it's not the birds or a lazy breeze brushing past your chimney. It's an airplane. Unlike cars, which often seduce us with sleek designs and glossy paint jobs, airplanes aren't judged by their looks. They're judged by trust. We don't marvel at their beauty. We instead wonder, will it get me there safely? For most people, the expectation is simple. A plane should take off, fly smoothly, and land without drama. But in recent years, that trust has been shaken, and one name keeps coming up. Boeing, the aviation giant, once the gold standard of air travel, now finds itself under fire. Not just for the tragic crashes that have made headlines, but for something even more alarming: failing to meet critical safety standards and putting profits ahead of people. June 12, 2025, a date that will haunt Indian aviation for decades, might also be the end of the beginning for Boeing. Air India Flight 171, a scheduled service from Ahmedabad to London Heathrow, carried 260 souls: business travelers, families, students returning to school, and honeymooners chasing a dream. Aboard the 12-year-old Boeing 787 Dreamliner, there was nothing out of the ordinary, until there was. Just 38 seconds after takeoff, without warning, the twin engines of the aircraft lost thrust.
Thrust not achieved. Falling. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
The aircraft banked, dropped altitude, and in a horrifying plunge, slammed into a densely populated neighborhood less than 3 kilometers from the runway. The fireball lit up the early morning sky. There were no survivors. Locals described a deafening roar, then silence, followed by an explosion that shook windows blocks away. "We thought it was a gas explosion at first," said Arjun Patel, who lives near the crash site. "Then we saw the flames, and parts of the plane scattered across the street like paper." Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but what they found was unspeakable: twisted metal, a crater where houses once stood, and a death toll that included dozens on the ground. It became one of India's worst aviation tragedies. When the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau released its preliminary report just 3 weeks later, many hoped for answers. Instead, it opened a Pandora's box of terrifying possibilities. With this Pandora box opened, the Boeing 787 nightmare has been exposed, and what they just found is unbelievable. According to the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, both fuel control switches were abruptly flipped to cut off, a move that cuts fuel to the engines. This is a normal procedure after landing, but Flight 171 had just taken off. An accident, perhaps? But Boeing has run out of ways to cover itself in any glory nowadays. The CVR captured a chilling exchange. Pilot A asked why the other pilot had cut off, to which Pilot B replied that he hadn't done so. To this day, It remains unclear who spoke first and who flipped the switch, or if this is just another of Boeing's long list of oversight. While one engine had begun to recover, the second hadn't regained thrust in time. The aircraft was too low, too slow, and too heavy to recover. Well, it's not exactly shocking then that theories have emerged like wildfire. Some media outlets blamed the cockpit crew, Captain Sumit Sabharwal and First Officer Clive Kunder, both seasoned aviators with over 19,000 combined hours. Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera even claimed the co-pilot accused the captain of shutting down the engines, but aviation experts weren't convinced. Could this really be pilot error? Or was there something deeper? Mechanical failure, a software glitch, or a known issue Boeing had long buried under corporate press releases? One theory points to a failure in the plane's full-authority digital engine control, an automated system that monitors engine health and performance. If FADEC received faulty sensor data, it might have triggered an uncommanded fuel shutdown. But even this doesn't fully align with the timeline from the cockpit voice recorder. As the days passed, the question grew louder. Was this avoidable? Within hours of the crash, Boeing released a short statement expressing sympathy and pledging support for the investigation. But then came the distancing. Boeing is not involved in daily airline operations or maintenance decisions. We are cooperating fully with the AAIB. And for many, that translates to Boeing failing to take responsibilities by making it clear they're not the ones to blame. Yet critics argue that Boeing has developed a pattern, one that's riddled with flaws. Even on the street, the average person now looks up and wonders, is it safe to fly Boeing anymore? While some believe the fuel switches were manually flipped, blaming it on a tragic human error. Others point to electronic faults, suggesting this was a ticking time bomb in the aircraft's design. The truth may lie somewhere in between. This was a routine takeoff that became a national nightmare. And as the world watches Boeing with weary eyes, a single haunting question echoes. How did Boeing get here? Let's delve into the promises that made people dream. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner's promise and hype. It was supposed to change everything. When Boeing unveiled the 787 Dreamliner in 2007, it wasn't just launching a new airplane, it was promising a future. Sleek, silent, smarter than anything that had come before it. With curved wingtips, whisper-quiet engines, and a cabin designed for comfort, the Dreamliner was Boeing's moonshot, an aircraft built for the 21st century. They called it the Dreamliner. And the dream was intoxicating, or perhaps, more accurately, it's now toxicating. On paper, the 787 was everything a modern airline and its passengers could hope for. Constructed largely from carbon fiber reinforced polymers, the plane was lighter, stronger, and more resistant to corrosion than traditional aluminum designs. That weight reduction meant 20% better fuel efficiency, a game-changer for long-haul flights. Airlines could fly farther, faster, and more economically, opening new direct routes between cities like London and Perth, or Tokyo and San Jose. Inside, the Dreamliner promised a new standard of luxury in the sky. Larger windows that dimmed electronically, higher humidity, lower cabin altitude, less jet lag, fewer headaches. For the first time, Boeing was selling the experience of flying, not just the machine. And then there was the cockpit, a marvel of avionics, featuring the latest fly-by-wire systems, dual head-up displays, and advanced navigation tools that made flying more efficient and, supposedly, safer. But dreams, it turned out, can be fragile things. One of Boeing's boldest innovations wasn't in the air, it was in the factory. A factory that's popularly called the Shadow Factory because of the secret operations that's locked behind the thick brick walls. To speed up production and cut costs, Boeing adopted a global supply chain model unlike anything the aviation industry had seen. Rather than building the plane in-house, Boeing sourced parts from around the world: wings from Japan, fuselage sections from Italy, doors from France, and landing gear from the UK. It was a logistical ballet, one that depended on perfect timing, seamless communication, and unwavering quality from dozens of suppliers. But cracks began to show early. The global outsourcing strategy led to years of delays. The first delivery, initially planned for 2008, didn't happen until 2011. Behind the scenes, Boeing engineers were scrambling to correct wiring mismatches, software integration failures, and fastener issues that made assembling the jet more like solving a jigsaw puzzle with pieces from 20 different boxes. The Dreamliner wasn't just late, it was troubled, and the whispers grew louder. In 2023, those whispers turned into an alarm bell. Richard Cuevas, a former mechanic contracted through Strom to work at Spirit Aerosystems, a key Boeing supplier, came forward with chilling claims. According to Cuevas, several forward pressure bulkheads on Boeing 787s were being improperly drilled at Spirit's Wichita facility. The bulkhead is no minor part. It's essential for maintaining cabin pressure and structural integrity mid-flight. Cuevas alleged that holes were being drilled slightly too wide, in violation of Boeing's specs, so workers could remove excess paint and speed up assembly. These tiny gaps, he warned, could weaken the bulkhead's ability to contain pressure, potentially leading to a catastrophic failure at altitude. "You're not just compromising the plane," Cuevas reportedly told colleagues. "You're gambling with lives." He filed complaints through Boeing's ethics hotline and alerted management. Shortly after, he noticed a shift in the workplace. Comments like, "We've got a snitch among us," floated through the air. In March 2024, Cuevas was fired. According to complaints filed by his attorneys, he believes 10 to 12 Dreamliners, either still in production or already delivered, may have been affected by the same defects. Boeing quickly downplayed the allegations, stating that it had thoroughly investigated the claims and determined they posed no safety risk. The company said a subcontractor's employee had previously reported concerns, which were taken seriously and addressed after engineering analysis found no safety issues. Boeing asserted that the issues raised did not present a safety concern. But for many, the reassurance fell flat, especially given Boeing's recent history. This wasn't the first time safety shortcuts had been exposed.
"We've got a problem here. This panel is loose."
And, with the deadly 737 MAX disasters still fresh in public memory, confidence in Boeing's internal oversight had already been shaken. Cuevas's firing raises questions if he was wrongly terminated. The discrepancy in Spirit's involvement in Boeing's press releases versus lawsuits is notable, sparking curiosity about the true nature of their partnership. There's no doubt that the Boeing 787 is a marvel of engineering. It's quieter, it flies farther, it consumes less fuel. Over 1,000 Dreamliners are in the skies today, serving more than 50 airlines and millions of passengers. The Dreamliner was built to inspire trust in the sky. But trust, like a bulkhead under pressure, can buckle when drilled too thin. And these incidents have done more harm than good to Boeing's reputation. But there's more to it than the allegations of whistleblowers. A turbulent history of malfunctions. When Boeing launched the 787 Dreamliner, it was heralded as a game-changer, a symbol of cutting-edge aviation. But, from a long history of malfunction ranging from battery fires to structural anomalies, the 787's story has proven to be one that's marked by high expectations and repeated letdowns. The first major red flag came just 2 years after the Dreamliner entered service. In early 2013, 2 separate incidents involving lithium-ion battery fires on 787s, belonging to All Nippon Airways and Japan Airlines, sent shockwaves through the aviation world. One aircraft experienced a fire while parked at Boston Logan Airport. The other made an emergency landing after smoke filled the cabin. The culprit? The 787's revolutionary lithium-ion batteries, lighter and more energy efficient, but prone to thermal runaway, a chain reaction overheating event that can lead to fires or even explosions. Investigators found that the battery's containment system was severely inadequate, unable to stop a small failure from becoming a full-blown hazard. The response was swift and historic. For the first time since 1979, the FAA grounded an entire aircraft model. Boeing scrambled to redesign the battery housing, reinforcing it with steel and rerouting smoke vents. The fix took 3 months, grounding all 50 Dreamliners in service at the time and costing hundreds of millions in flight cancellations and engineering work. The Dreamliner had barely taken flight, and already it was in crisis. Just as Boeing moved past the battery crisis, another problem soared into view, this time with the Dreamliner's power plant. The 787 is powered by 2 engine options, General Electric's GNX and Rolls-Royce's Trent 1000. It was the latter that became a headache for carriers worldwide. Between 2016 and 2020, several 787s equipped with the Trent 1000 experienced mid-air engine failures, sometimes forcing emergency landings or diversions. The root cause was a premature corrosion and cracking issue in intermediate pressure turbine blades and compressors, vital components that must withstand extreme heat and pressure. The fix wasn't simple. Entire fleets had to be grounded while engine replacements or inspections were carried out. Rolls-Royce estimated the cost of resolving the Trent 1000 issues at over £2 billion, while Boeing was left juggling angry customers, logistical nightmares, and damaged credibility. Even as Boeing resolved battery and engine woes, more cracks, literal ones, started to appear in the Dreamliner's armor. In 2019 and 2020, Boeing and the FAA began quietly inspecting several 787s after reports of gaps between fuselage sections, specifically where major body components were joined together. These gaps, if too wide, could lead to structural failure under stress. Further investigation revealed additional issues with the Dreamliners, including delamination in the carbon fiber skin, which compromises the aircraft's strength by causing layers to separate. Surface wrinkling near wing body joints was also discovered, potentially affecting aerodynamics and safety. Moreover, concerns arose about debris being left inside fuel tanks during manufacturing. These problems were not isolated incidents, but rather systemic issues that plagued the production process. As a result, over 100 Dreamliners were pulled from active service, prompting the Federal Aviation Administration to launch a deeper audit into Boeing's South Carolina production facility. This audit uncovered a series of quality control lapses, revealing that some jets had not met Boeing's own tolerances yet were still cleared for delivery. The findings highlighted significant concerns about the manufacturing process and Boeing's quality control measures. The issues with the 787 had far-reaching consequences that resonated throughout the aviation industry. Several airlines were forced to take drastic measures, including All Nippon Airways, which grounded over a dozen Dreamliners for engine checks. Qatar Airways, once a major Boeing supporter, publicly criticized the aircraft's reliability. Similarly, Polish Airlines, Air India, United Airlines, and Ethiopian Airlines experienced problems that impacted their operations. These issues resulted in delayed route launches, passenger refunds, and substantial financial losses totaling billions of dollars. The severity of the situation led some airlines to reassess their fleet strategies altogether. The impact on Boeing was equally significant. By 2021, the company had over 100 undelivered Dreamliners in storage due to unresolved quality concerns. The production delays, compensation, and inspections cost Boeing more than $6 billion, highlighting the substantial financial toll of the 787's troubles. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner is still flying, still admired by pilots, still praised for its fuel efficiency. But for many in the industry, and millions of passengers, the dream has lost its luster. With each new incident, each hidden flaw, each carefully worded press release, one uncomfortable truth takes shape. The Dreamliner has become a case study, not just in innovation, but in what happens when ambition races ahead of accountability. This has forced many whistleblowers to speak up, but what else did they reveal about this crumbling empire? Let's delve into that. A growing list of problems for Boeing. Boeing was once synonymous with safety, a gold standard in aviation engineering. But beneath the polished branding and billion-dollar aircraft rollouts lies a culture many insiders say is deeply flawed. A culture where profit trumped prudence, deadlines beat due diligence, and those who raised red flags were sidelined or silenced. With the crack now showing more often than not, and as more whistleblowers step forward and investigations pile up, many are starting to wonder if Boeing cutting corners is beginning to cost more than money. In recent years, whistleblowers, internal memos, and leaked emails have painted a bleak picture inside Boeing's production facilities. Former and current employees describe a high-pressure environment where delivery quotas ruled, and executives cared more about share prices than safe skies. Multiple reports allege that senior leadership actively discouraged raising concerns that might delay shipments. Engineers and safety staff were pressured to sign off and move on, often before proper testing and verification were completed. "We were told to stop being roadblocks," said one anonymous former quality engineer. Management didn't want delays. They wanted deliveries. The result? Aircraft rolling off the line that looked pristine on the surface, but harbored dangerous secrets beneath their skin. It wasn't just internal workers raising alarms. FAA inspectors repeatedly found flaws in Boeing's assembly lines, particularly at the now infamous Charleston, South Carolina plant. According to a government audit, Boeing often failed to meet its own quality control standards. Parts were mislabeled or lost, documentation was incomplete, and tools were left inside aircraft fuselages. In one case, inspectors flagged unsafe wiring bundles near flammable materials. Boeing's response has been the systemic delay, deny, and dismiss. Internal audits that exposed these issues were quietly shelved. Some were closed out without ever resolving the root problem. The FAA confirmed that Boeing repeatedly failed to implement meaningful changes, even after being warned. One major turning point in Boeing's manufacturing philosophy came with its decision to heavily outsource production. In the past, Boeing built most of its parts in-house, but in an attempt to cut costs and scale up quickly, the company began sourcing critical components globally, often relying on contracted labor and less experienced subcontractors. The result was chaotic. Parts arrived late, out of spec, or missing key documentation. Contract workers, some without proper aerospace training, were tasked with complex installations. A single error, a misaligned panel, a widened bolt hole, a faulty drill could compromise the aircraft's integrity. A former Charleston employee told the New York Times, "People were being trained on Monday and drilling holes in jetliners by Thursday." The most disturbing part of this unfolding saga is that Boeing was warned repeatedly. Safety engineers wrote anonymous letters. Some confronted management directly. Others went public only after being ignored or fired. Among them was Sam Salihpour, a Boeing engineer who reported gaps between fuselage sections on the 787 and 777 as early as 2021. For nearly 2 years, the FAA and Boeing suspended Dreamliner deliveries while they reviewed the issue. Salihpour warned that the defects, if unaddressed, could compromise the structure of the aircraft mid-flight. And he wasn't alone. More than a dozen whistleblowers have come forward in the last few years, a number that skyrocketed after a door plug blew off a 737 MAX mid-air in January 2024, leaving a gaping hole in the aircraft. Thankfully, no lives were lost, but the symbolism was undeniable. The very shell of Boeing's trust had been ripped open, and the world could see inside. One whistleblower recently alleged that Boeing tried to hide broken or out-of-specification 737 MAX parts from regulators and lost track of them. He fears those parts may now be flying on passenger aircraft. The Federal Aviation Administration has launched multiple investigations into Boeing's manufacturing and safety protocols, scrutinizing the company's practices. A 6-week audit conducted in early 2024 uncovered several issues with Boeing's production methods, raising concerns about the company's ability to ensure the safety and quality of its aircraft. A separate safety culture report highlighted significant problems within the organization. According to the report, there is a notable disconnect between management and frontline workers, creating a climate of fear and retaliation that discourages employees from reporting defects. This toxic environment has serious implications for Boeing's ability to identify and address safety concerns. The scrutiny of Boeing extends beyond the FAA. The United States Department of Justice is considering criminal charges against the company for its alleged failures and cover-ups. Boeing's CEO, Dave Calhoun, was summoned to testify before the United States Senate, where he acknowledged the company's safety lapses and apologized for them. While Calhoun denied retaliating against whistleblowers, he admitted that Boeing is far from perfect and recognized that regaining the public's trust will be a long and challenging process. The whistleblowers and critics continue to speak. Behind every corporate crisis lies a chorus of voices that tried to sound the alarm and were too often ignored. One of the most haunting names in Boeing's long list of critics is John Barnett. For over 30 years, Barnett worked inside Boeing until what he saw became impossible to stay silent about. He publicly revealed that substandard parts were being knowingly installed in Dreamliners and that safety alerts were being disabled or ignored to keep production moving. Barnett also said he found metal shavings near electrical wiring, shavings that could potentially spark fires mid-air. Boeing denied the allegations, but Barnett didn't back down. He filed an official complaint with the FAA and went on record in multiple interviews, calling Boeing's culture broken. Then, in March 2024, just days before he was scheduled to testify in court against Boeing, Barnett was found dead in a parked truck near his hotel, with what authorities described as a self-inflicted wound. But his family and legal team weren't convinced. They said he was optimistic, cooperative, and had just texted a colleague about trial prep. The suspicious timing of his death only intensified public scrutiny and turned him into a symbol of what happens when you speak out against a giant. Another prominent voice was Edward Pearson, a former senior manager at Boeing's 737 factory in Renton, Washington. In 2019, Pearson sat before the United States Congress and delivered a blistering warning. Boeing had pushed planes out of the factory at unsafe speeds, ignored internal alarms, and buried safety reports. "I tried to get them to slow down," he said in his testimony. But the pressure to deliver planes on time overruled everything else. His warnings, especially following the two tragic 737 MAX crashes, prompted a flurry of questions. If Pearson had raised the alarm before the crashes, why hadn't Boeing or the FAA acted? His testimony helped crack open the facade of Boeing's public image and placed a target on the FAA's back for its lax oversight and regulatory capture. Over the past few years, a string of high-profile congressional hearings has put Boeing executives and FAA regulators in the hot seat. Lawmakers, angered by repeated failures and damning whistleblower accounts, accused both Boeing and the FAA of prioritizing production over people. "What we're looking at is a company that has consistently gambled with safety," one senator declared, "and an agency that let them get away with it." The hearings weren't just about uncovering the past. They were about whether Boeing could be trusted with the future. While Boeing maintained its corporate polish, investigative journalists worked to peel it away. What unites Barnett, Pearson, and the many anonymous voices who followed is a shared conviction. Boeing lost its way. These whistleblowers weren't outsiders with an agenda. They were insiders with a conscience. And their message was clear. It wasn't just an accident. It was a system. A system that rewarded silence, punished caution, and buried the truth, until it burst into the headlines with every preventable crash, every haunting detail, and every name that never made it home. But how did Boeing move from the standard of excellence to an industry that's trying so hard to keep its house from burning to ashes? Let's delve into Boeing's management style and their reputation. Boeing's troubling leadership. At 35,000 feet, we trust that someone somewhere has made the right decisions to keep us safe. But what happens when the people at the top aren't pilots, engineers, or safety experts, but Wall Street-minded executives chasing stock prices? To understand the flaws in Boeing's planes, we must first understand the flaws in Boeing's leadership, where the company's transformation from a legendary engineering firm into a profit-obsessed behemoth laid the groundwork for disaster. For much of the 20th century, Boeing was an engineering powerhouse, the company that brought the world the iconic 747, a plane so reliable it became the gold standard of long-haul flight. But things changed dramatically in 1997, when Boeing merged with rival McDonnell Douglas. Though Boeing technically absorbed McDonnell Douglas, it was the latter's corporate culture, one driven by shareholder value, quarterly earnings, and cost-cutting that began to take over. The shift was more than symbolic. In 2001, Boeing moved its headquarters from Seattle, the heart of its airplane manufacturing, to Chicago. For critics, it was a signal. Boeing's leadership was distancing itself from the people who built the planes. Suddenly, engineers no longer drove the company's vision. MBAs did. At the center of Boeing's most public scandal, the 737 MAX crashes, stood Dennis Muilenburg, CEO from 2015 to 2019. Initially seen as a steady leader, Muilenburg's legacy is now defined by two devastating crashes, 346 lives lost, and a shocking lack of accountability. Under his watch, Boeing rushed the 737 MAX into production, bypassed critical pilot training, and downplayed the risks of the now infamous MCAS software system. He insisted the aircraft was safe long after internal messages revealed engineers knew of potential flaws. Even after the crashes, Boeing pushed for faster returns to service, rather than fully addressing the root problems. Muilenburg was eventually ousted, but not before walking away with a $62 million exit package. When David Calhoun took the reins in 2020, Boeing was already in crisis, but the troubles didn't end there. Calhoun inherited not only the 737 MAX fallout, but also growing concerns around the 787 Dreamliner, which was plagued by structural flaws, quality control issues, and internal whistleblower complaints. While Calhoun promised change and even apologized before Congress, critics argue that his actions haven't matched his words. Under his leadership, Boeing has continued to face investigations, factory audits, and more whistleblowers than ever before. His focus on rebuilding trust often clashed with ongoing headlines about fired whistleblowers, lost parts, and safety lapses. Inside Boeing's executive suites, one priority reigned supreme: deliver planes, increase profits, boost shareholder value. Over the past 2 decades, leadership tied bonuses and executive compensation not to safety metrics or engineering excellence, but to the number of aircraft delivered each year. This created enormous pressure to rush production, cut corners, and downplay defects, all in the name of keeping Wall Street happy. As former employees and safety managers have revealed, internal pushback was often ignored, and concerns buried under layers of bureaucracy. This short-term focus on stock value may have brought brief financial wins, but at a steep and tragic cost. Perhaps most alarming is Boeing's long-running influence over its own regulators. The Federal Aviation Administration, the very agency tasked with ensuring aircraft safety, implemented a controversial policy known as Organization Designation Authorization, more commonly referred to as self-certification. This meant that Boeing was allowed to certify many of its own systems and safety processes with minimal oversight. The results are seen in the 737 MAX crisis and Dreamliner investigations, critical flaws that went unnoticed or unchallenged until it was too late. Multiple government reports have since condemned the FAA's relationship with Boeing, calling it too cozy, too passive, and too trusting. Some even argue that Boeing had effectively become its own watchdog. Boeing's leadership problems are no longer limited to the boardroom, profits, and pleasing shareholders. It's becoming a matter of life and death. The shift from precision to profit, safety to speed, accountability to arrogance has left passengers and employees alike paying the price. And while names like Muilenburg and Calhoun may come and go, the culture they helped shape still lingers, a legacy of ambition unchecked and of leadership that lost sight of what it truly means to fly responsibly. The Boeing 787 flaws that were exposed in India have kept the whole world focused on Boeing. And after what has been made glaring to the entire universe, it's going to be unbelievable if Boeing doesn't start changing a lot of things. Until that culture changes, Boeing's most serious threat may not be turbulence at 30,000 feet, but the ones making decisions on the ground. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.